So you're ready to retire, but you plan on holding off on claiming Social Security so that you can get a higher payout. And you're trying to figure out, can you afford to retire before claiming Social Security? And how should you manage your money and your investments? And where should you draw from to fund your retirement until Social Security kicks in? Well, that's the question we're going to tackle in today's video. And we're going to look at three high-level questions. The first, of course, is can you afford to retire? And how should we even think about that issue when you're going to wait a few years before claiming Social Security? That's question one. Question two then is, where should the money come from that you're going to live on until Social Security kicks in? Are there tax considerations that we should factor in? How should we even think about that? And then the third question is, for the money you are going to spend before Social Security, how should you invest it? Should you make any changes to the way you invest that money? So that's what we're going to look at. Let's dive right in. I'm going to show you two different tools. The first is Empower, and we're going to look at New Retirement in just a minute. There's big differences between these two tools. New Retirement, I think, is a great free tool to manage your investments, track your budget, and the retirement planner that we're going to look at. As retirement planners go, I'll call it a high-level tool. As you'll see, New Retirement allows us to dig into far greater detail. And just one example of that is taxes, and we'll look at that in a minute. But in Empower, it's very easy and very quick to get a rough idea of what your spending would look like if you retired before taking Social Security. So this is a demo account. I've just thrown some manual accounts in here, equals about $1.3 million. If we go over to planning, go to retirement planner, it runs a Monte Carlo analysis, simulations. It runs 5,000 simulations. And the first thing we need to look at are our assumptions before we even look at the results. So it pulls in whatever accounts you were to link over here. You link all your investment accounts and 401ks and IRAs. It pulls all of those in automatically. You can exclude an account if you want to, which might make sense if you've got one account that's designated for some particular spending need. But it pulls them all in. With Social Security, you would want to get your actual numbers from the Social Security Administration, but they also offer this tool that does an estimate, and I've just set it to 70. And then retirement spending, for the moment, I've put it at $6,000 a month. And this hypothetical person is retiring. They're 65 today, and we're planning for a 30-year retirement. And then they certainly don't offer the level of detail you can go into with New Retirement, but they do offer these three assumptions: an effective tax rate, inflation rate, life expectancy. I've left those alone. And it runs the simulations. And as we can see, the results, at least with what we've put in there, not very good, 58%. It actually runs two different numbers here. The first one is sort of at the 50th percentile. You can see we actually do survive 30 years without running out of money. But a 50% confidence level is probably certainly wouldn't be comfortable for me. I doubt it'd be comfortable for you. If you want a 90% confidence level, it's this lower line. But unfortunately, we run out of money around age 86, 87. Again, understand this is a simulation based on historical data. We don't know what the future is going to hold, but this gives us sort of a bird's eye view of what could happen based on historical data. And what we can then do is start to make changes to see if we can maybe improve the likelihood this plan will succeed. We could, for example, say, well, I'm going to retire at 65. I don't know. Maybe I'll take my Social Security at 67. What's that look like? And it runs simulations, actually makes things worse. So maybe that's not the way to go. We can put that back. So then we could say, all right, well, what if we spend $6,000 a month, but they've got this nice tool where they can say, as we get older, we spend less. Maybe we'll reduce our spending by 1% a year, but they have a minimum, never go below some minimum. What does that do to our plan? Well, that gets us to 90%. So that might be comfortable for you. That might be a good plan. Of course, you could also change the amount you're spending each month. The other thing you can do is, rather than going in and changing these numbers as I've shown you, you could leave them all as we originally had them set and then create new scenarios. Create a new scenario where you spend less money or you reduce your spending. As we did, or claim Social Security at a different age, or maybe you say, what happens if I add an income and I'll do a part-time job. So you can just do it as, work during retirement. I'll work during retirement, and if there's something you enjoy doing, you make some money. So you could play with those different options. And then the last thing I'll show you before we move to new retirement is, how is a projection calculated? It actually brings you to a white paper that goes into detail about how they run these simulations. You might want to read that. But also, you can look at a detailed cash flow, and it shows you year by year. This is when, over here is when Social Security kicks in, and shows you year by year what your spending might look like. So overall, I think Empower is a great tool. Again, it's a high level. You can't do a lot of tax planning, Roth conversions. It doesn't look at you can't control like IRMA, which is that extra premium you may have to pay for Medicare. You don't get into things like long-term care insurance. All of those things we can look at in new retirement. So let's go to that now. Here we are. Now I've put in very similar numbers. If we go to My Plan, Accounts, you can see we've got a total of 1.3 million. And for expenses, I've got 6,000 a month, same thing. You'll notice we go to the overview. Remember, Empower showed us initially with a 58% chance of success, but here at new retirement, it's 93%. What's going on? Well, there are at least two things going on. The first is, with new retirement, you can control the expected returns on each account. So for the investment accounts, I have an optimistic rate of return of 10%, pessimistic of 4%, and then you come over to these assumptions over here, and you can either use the pessimistic, the optimistic, or I'm using an average. And so that's the average of 10 and 4 is 7%, and new retirement actually uses that in its simulations, and then it attaches a variance based on that return rate. So you have at least some control over the inputs to the simulation, which you don't have with Empower. But probably the more important difference is that in Empower, all of these accounts are traditional IRAs or 401ks, which means every withdrawal is treated as ordinary income and subject to tax. Here, I decided to mix things up a bit, and we can see it easier here. I put 400 in a Roth, 400 in a traditional, 100 in effectively a checking account, and 400 in a taxable investment account. And so the tax treatment is different. And just to show you the taxable investment account quickly, when you do a taxable investment account in new retirement, you can choose either capital gains or ordinary income tax treatment. So for the we'll come back here for just a second. For the checking account, I call it a bucket 1 cash. Actually, I'm just going to rename it checking account. You'll see it's ordinary income, and I show it earning 1% interest. But for the investment account, I give it capital gains treatment, and you set the cost basis. So I just put in half of the value. You can also put in a turnover rate if you're buying and selling within the account or for dividends. But for our purposes, I'm going to leave it at 0% for right now. And but because of that different tax treatment, you may say, wait a minute, Rob, I get that, fine. Roth is tax-free. The taxable investments, that you get favorable long-term capital gains treatment, and not all of it's taxable. But are you telling me that those differences can take us from 58% to 93%? Yeah, actually, I am telling you that. Now, again, the Monte Carlo analysis that they run is a bit different, so that's going to account for some of it. But yes, taxes really, really matter in assessing the likelihood of success of a retirement plan. And in fact, that's why I want to spend a little time looking at that for those of you that are going to retire first, claim Social Security later. It's important for any of us in retirement, but it's particularly important if you're going to claim Social Security some years after you retire. And let me show you why. In new retirement, you get this section down here called Insights. It's a really important part of the program. And let's jump down to taxes. We can see, and I always want to refresh it to make sure it's got the correct data. If you change things in the plan, sometimes you have to refresh a page to see the changes. You'll notice the estimated taxes, and we're at the federal level. Boy, they're not very much these first few years. They're pretty low. And we can see why. Remember, we don't have a job, right? In this scenario, we've retired. We're not getting Social Security for the first 5 years. RMDs haven't kicked in yet. And so the only taxable income in these first few years are coming from when we have to sell our taxable investments. And even then, it triggers only partial part of that sale is taxable, right? Because we had $200,000 in cost basis, and it's long-term capital gains. And if we actually come down to the federal income tax brackets, this is income, nothing. And we can see here our capital gains. You can see the amount over here. But remember, a lot of that, if not all of that, is in a 0% tax bracket. In fact, I pulled up the capital gains tax rates. You can see for a single person, and that's what I've modeled in New Retirement, at least at the moment, up to $41,675, again, assuming you have no other ordinary income, is a 0% tax rate. And so we can really see, going back here, the benefits of the tax benefits we're getting because of the way I've structured this. Now, we might be able to do even better. And to understand that, we need to go back to our accounts for a second. And I want to look at them here. One thing to understand about New Retirement, and this, by the way, is important for any retirement planning tool, whatever you may use, is that we need to understand what order will the tool take from our different accounts. So, for example, for next year, we need to spend $72,000, right? $6,000 a month is what we programmed. Where's that money coming from? Well, the way New Retirement works is it first takes from taxable accounts. In our case, the checking account and the taxable investments. And it depletes all of those accounts. Then it moves up to traditional, depletes all of those accounts, and then goes to Roth. And then beyond that, HSA, which we're not modeling in this plan. Now, when you have more than one account at each of those levels, so for example, we have 2 taxable accounts, how does it know which one to take from? Well, it'll first take from the one with the lowest rate of return. So in our case, it's the checking account. If you may recall, I set that up with a return of just 1%. The taxable investments have a return of 7%. So it will deplete this $100,000 first, then it will deplete this $400,000, then it'll jump up to the traditional and deplete this account, and then it will jump up and delete the Roth IRAs. And that's important to know because you may have multiple traditional IRAs and multiple Roths and multiple taxable accounts, and you can affect the order within each of those categories by the rate of return you put in. So even if you think, well, I think it's 7% for everything, you might have one at 7.1 and another at 7 or 6.9 if you want to affect the order. But there's another way we can affect the order, and that's what I want to show you. And we're going to see how it might affect the plan. So to show you that, I want to jump back to taxes for a minute. Again, we want to look at these tax brackets where, we're not, eventually when RMDs kick in, and Social Security kicks in, we're going to start to see higher tax brackets up to the 22% bracket. But maybe we could fill in some taxable income here and reduce our overall taxes throughout our lifetime. We could do that possibly with Roth conversions, but I'm going to do it a different way. Both of what I'm going to show you would be in money flow. So here are the Roth conversions. But what I want to do is actually do a transfer. And here's how it works. We could come in here and say, look, for we'll just look at 1 year, 2024. We know that we're not going to have any taxable income because we're pulling that $72,000 from a checking account, right? So what if we actually took a distribution from our traditional IRA and we're going to move it into that checking account because we're going to spend it, right? And we'll put it in at, I'll just put in, we could all do all 72,000, but let's start with 50,000. And it's going to be a one-time for now. And when are we going to do it? Well, let's do it this year, December 23, because we don't have any taxable income, and we'll save it. Whenever you make a change like that, you get this pop-up, which is really useful. So it says we have a whopping $603 more at the end of our lifetime. But look at this, we're paying $21,000 less in taxes. I like it. So we can come down to the taxes and we can see what's going on. We can see, oh, yeah, we're paying more in taxes. Here it is, and it's purple. And we come over here, it says, that's because you transfer money, Rob. That's why you've got these taxes. Good. It's what we expected. And we can come down here, and this shows us our tax bracket. So we're still within the 12% tax bracket. So we could start to refine that. We could come back up here and say, well, let's edit this. Let's do the full boat. We'll do 72,000. I don't know really why I called it the full boat, but there you go. All right, and we can come down to taxes. Of course, they're going to go up, and we can look at our ooh, yeah, I don't think I like that. We've got 14,420 in that 22% tax bracket on 72,000. So maybe we come down to like 58,000. Come here, we can edit it. Let's just try 58 and see what we get. Save it. Come back to taxes. By the way, we can see the differences. Come back to taxes. Yeah, that keeps us in. I guess it was $420 in the 22% tax bracket. So I suppose we could shave that down a little bit, and then we could keep going, right? We could say, all right, well, let's we'll come back to transfers. We'll just make it. We'll make it 57.5. But here's what we're going to do. We're going to do it annually. But we're going to stop it. We don't want to go to the end of our lives. We're just going to do till we get to Social Security. So we'll come down here and we'll pick, let's see. We're going to start receiving Social Security at age 70, November 29. So we'll just stop it here. Save it. We can see the difference. We're going to have 50 grand more at the end of our lives. We're going to pay 114,000 less in taxes. That's all good. We can come down to taxes, come down to our brackets. Pretty good. Nothing goes into the 22%. We can see how that orange we had before is gone. And we could even do some more. Now, one thing I'll say, I won't do more transfers. I think you get the idea. But one thing I would suggest, you could edit the transfer we just did to try to incorporate these years. But another thing you could do that might be easier is rather than editing this, just add another one. And you can start it, where the other one left off and play with that until you get the results you want. The other thing that I would always keep an eye on is IRMA, because we're pulling money from the IRA that's taxable, and that's creating some taxable income for us. We might be happy with that because of the lower tax brackets, but we also want to know, does it trigger any IRMA? And right now it's saying no. Let me refresh that just to make sure. But you always want to keep an eye on IRMA and what impact your transfers, Roth conversions are having on IRMA. Always very, very important. And if we go back to overview, I don't know if you remember, it was 93%. Now we're at 95. Frankly, I wouldn't put a lot of weight on the difference between 93 and 95, but I'd prefer it to go up, not down. But so I've really only scratched the surface of the things you can do with new retirement. But I wanted to show you, and this would apply, even if maybe you are claiming Social Security when you retire, you still could have a lower taxable income in those early years before RMDs kick in. And so this sort of tax analysis can be very helpful. If you have someone who prepares your taxes as we do, I think I'd probably run this by them before you made any final decisions. But you can get an idea from what I showed you how a lot of this works. Now, if you've stuck with me in the videos this far, thank you. I do want to just cover one last topic, and that is, should we think any differently about how we invest our money? You may have, your sort of straightforward, simple portfolio. You've got, X amount in stocks, maybe U.S. stocks and international stocks. You've got another, the rest of it in bonds, maybe a total bond market fund. Maybe you're 70-30 or 60-40. And should you do anything differently? Should you just pull from that those those investments each year? Depending on which account you're pulling from, you may do those transfers like I showed you from a traditional IRA. That's fine. You still have to decide which investments to pull it from. Should you just pull those out and rebalance each year and keep your 60-40 or 70-30 portfolio? Or should you invest the money in a very specific way to cover those, in our case, 5 years before Social Security begins? Well, for me, I think it's perfectly fine just to keep investing the way you plan to invest for retirement and withdrawing money. I don't think I would invest in any particularly special way. However, I think some folks get a little nervous about that. They say, Rob, listen, if I take Social Security now, don't wait, it's guaranteed and I feel comfortable. If I'm going to wait 5 years, that makes me a little nervous. Can I take some money out and invest it in a specific way to cover those 5 years? It gets me to Social Security. I'm just going to sleep better at night. Absolutely. If I wanted to do that, what I would probably do is just build a 5-year tips ladder. You could take the money you're going to need, I would take it out of the bond allocation. That's how I would do it. So if you had a 60-40 portfolio, I would still have a 60-40 portfolio. It's just that that 40% in fixed income would include tips that cover the first 5 years. And one easy investment you could use, I've shown you this before, that you might, and you could invest in this inside of a traditional IRA, and then each year pull that money out and put it in your checking account, for example, if that made sense from a tax perspective. But it's called I-bonds. Now, this is not the U.S. government I-bonds. This is a part of iShares. Let me show it to you. They've recently released tips. And let me see if I can show them here. Here we go, U.S. tips. And you can easily build a 5-year tips ladder. The 2024, you can see its ticker IBIA. So this is going to, it's a fund, but it kind of acts like individual tips bonds. It's going to mature at the end of 2024 and give you your money back. And you could then take that money and use it for 2025. And you could buy the 2025 fund for the next year and the 2026 fund for the year after that. So if you needed, say, a 3 or 4 or 5 year period of time before Social Security kicked in and you wanted that added security, you could build a tips ladder for those number of years, picking each successive fund, as I've shown you with these iShare I-bonds. Again, it's not the only reasonable way to invest in my view, but it certainly would be one. And remember, tips are adjusted for inflation. You're holding these ETFs until maturity. So you're getting a guaranteed, they call it real yield, meaning you're getting a yield that's probably around 2%. In fact, we can actually quickly look at one. Let's go to IBIA. This is the one that matures at the end of next year. And the real yield is, look at that, the real yield's higher than I thought. Wow, 4.56%, which means you're going to get that plus inflation. And this is going to mature at the end of 2024. But now, yeah, October right here. Now, keep in mind, you can always sell these funds early. You could sell them anytime that you want to, but you may end up selling at more or less than you paid depending on what interest rates are doing. But if you hold it to maturity, in this case, October of the end of next year, you know you're going to get that real yield plus inflation. So if you wanted that extra security until Social Security kicked in, yeah, you could build a tips ladder with those iShare tips ETFs. I hate that they call them I-bonds. Too confusing. But in any event, I know sort of a detailed video, and there's particularly when it gets into taxes, there's a lot of nuances. You really need to spend some time understanding a tool like New Retirement. And frankly, as well as I know it, I still learn new things about it every single day. But I do think it's a really good tool, can help you work your way through this. Or you could just hire a financial planner and help them, have them help you work out a plan if you'd like. So there you go. How to bridge the Social Security gap if you want to retire before claiming Social Security. Hopefully this video has given you some ideas to think about. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments below. Be happy to help you out any way I can. And until next time, remember, the best thing money can buy is financial freedom.